Hi, my name is Robin. I'm with Bouquet Jardin and Beautiful Flowers. Welcome to our video series. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make a rose hand-tied bouquet. Before I start making the bouquet itself, I wanted to go over the recommended and needed supplies that you're going to need. To start, you're going to want to have a vase of water ready. And you don't need it to be full, that's important to note. Just a couple of inches is fine. The other thing you're going to need is something to cut your stems. I recommend, if it's in your budget and if it's possible, to have a pair of strong floral snips. And the reason for that is rose stems are quite thick, so a regular pair of just office scissors is not going to be strong enough to make a clean cut. If possible, if you do have very, very strong kitchen scissors, they can do the job, but it's important to note that you want strong kitchen scissors, and again, not just a regular pair of office or school supply scissors. In terms of what you're going to bind your bouquet with, this is where I'm going to share my preference. There's two types of tape you can use. The most commonly recommended or used is one called floral tape. And it's that stretchy material that it isn't sticky on its own, but it becomes sticky when you stretch it and apply it to itself. I personally don't find this to be very strong. I don't like working with it. I don't find it very secure. I use a product called strapping tape, and this is like an actual tape, and it's sticky on the back, and it's really strong. It'll hold the stems quite secure. It is more expensive than floral tape. It's harder to find as well. But if you, again, if it's in your budget, I highly recommend it. Or if you're making a lot of bouquets, I do think it's worth it. In order to tie your ribbon onto or secure your ribbon to the stems, you're going to need some pins. And this is another place where I'm going to share my preference. Pins come in many different sizes. These are pearl-headed, they're decorative, they look very nice. I prefer to use the shorter pins. They come in long lengths as well. These are just easier to insert, and you don't have to worry about them coming through the other side if your bouquet is quite small. And the last thing is just to cover the bouquet handle ribbon. So I've just got some regular ivory ribbon here. You can use any color. In fact, I love when people use different colors. It's a really good way to work in some decorative elements into your bouquet. And we may or may not use this, we'll see how it goes, but it's just a decorative finish to put on the bouquet handle, just to give it a little bit more oomph, you could say. Okay, we're ready to get started on the roses then. Okay, so that covers the supplies, and now we're going to talk about the flowers we're going to use. Because it's a rose bridal bouquet, we're only using roses. The important thing to note, regardless of the type of flower you use, is you always want to prep your flowers before you begin. You want to prep all of the stems and have them ready to go. I've done that with most of these roses just because I wanted to save time, but I saved a couple to show you just what's involved in prepping a rose for a bouquet. So this particular variety is called Cool Water. It's a beautiful purple rose. It's probably one of the most commonly grown, and as you can see, it opens super well. It's really nice and big. So I've left it the way it came, and if you're buying your flowers in bulk, they most likely are going to come to you like this. So all of the leaves are still on, and this variety has a couple of thorns, and that's going to vary from flower to flower. Some of them are completely covered and some are thornless. So just be prepared that you may need to take these thorns off depending on the variety you get. So the first thing I do is I start stripping the leaves, and you can buy strippers, but I tend to just use my hands. It's just a habit I formed. But if you're really kind of concerned about that, you can buy a rose stripper. Just ask your florist or look online for one. So that's that. The next thing you want to do is take the thorns off. One way to do it is to just snip them off like this. That's probably the best way if you don't have a rose stripper or a thorn stripper as well. I tend to snap them off, but really you can't go wrong. The main thing is you don't want to damage the stem. It's better not to strip the stem when you're working on prepping the flowers. So I'll just snap a couple of these off at the bottom. Again, it's just my preference. As long as you're not damaging the flower, you're not going to go wrong. The last thing you want to do is remove the guard petals. And I think it's pretty obvious in your video as well, but the guard petals are the outer four, roughly four sort of ugly petals. And what they do is they just protect the rose, the inner petals that are on the inside, from damage during transport. So that's about the worst of it. There we go. And you can see already it's looking beautiful. So I'm just going to pop that back into the water. Okay, we're almost ready to start the bouquet. I've just got an additional tip for you, and it's a money-saving one. If you're planning to use rose petals in your wedding, I highly recommend hanging onto the guard petals. These are the guard petals from about 24 of those roses, and you can see it's quite a bit. It would be enough to fill like a small flower girl basket. It would be enough to scatter, say, on a cake table. They look beautiful when they're scattered out. And the way to keep them until the wedding is, as you remove them, put them in a Ziploc container or a Rubbermaid container with a dry paper towel on top, just to absorb any extra moisture. If you do that, they will last for a couple of days at least in your fridge, in a regular fridge as well. So a lot easier to put together than people think, and again, a good way to save money. You won't have to buy additional roses then to make rose petals. Okay, so we're gonna move that to the side, and we're gonna move some of these supplies out of the way really quick, just so we can get started. That's good. Okay, so to start on the bouquet. So before we get into the bouquet, one more bit of information that I think you guys will find useful. In terms of numbers, so we're gonna be making a rose hand-tied bouquet, and you can use this for a bride or you could use it for a bridesmaid. If you're making a bouquet for a bride, the general rule of thumb for a rose bridal bouquet is about 24 roses. That's kind of the standard that florists use. The important thing to know though with flower arranging is it's not an exact science. Sometimes you're going to use 22, sometimes you use 25. Depends on the size of the roses, it depends on how they come together. But most often 24 is kind of going to be kind of the average. For a bridesmaid bouquet, it's roughly half that. I tend to use 10 to 12 roses. Again, it depends on the size of the rose and how it comes together. It varies a little bit. I don't generally recommend going smaller than that size unless you have like a junior bridesmaid. So bridesmaids that are smaller, more petite, just because you want to watch the proportion. So yeah, I think we're ready to get started now. So it's pretty straightforward. This is, if you take a flower arranging course, this is going to be one of the first bouquets that you learn, just because it is the easiest. And it's the sort of the method that all other round hand ties are based off of. So what I usually do is I start with usually the biggest rose in the middle. You don't have to, but it's just a preference. It kind of is the focal point of the bouquet when you're done. So it's nice to have like the most beautiful rose in the middle. So it's pretty straightforward. You just sort of start with your one and you put your next one beside it. You hold it. I like to hold it close to the top, nice and snug. In terms of like whether you need to cross the stems or put them on a diagonal, the rule of thumb and what most people will teach is to put them on a diagonal. However, the lady who taught me, the florist, was very adamant that we keep our stems straight. And she liked it because she felt it was a cleaner finish, which for wedding work is kind of important. So what I took from that and what I learned is it doesn't really matter whether you cross the stems like this, because some videos will teach you that, or whether you choose to keep them straight. The one advantage that crossing stems has is it kind of reduces the pressure on the flower head and it's less likely to snap. So what I tend to do is I tend to start off with them going straight, and the outer roses I put on an angle. It really doesn't matter as long as the overall effect is what you want, which is usually just sort of a round sort of shape to the bouquet. So it's coming together quite well. Super easy. We've already kind of got our first sort of like round layer. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 roses. That would be like a good size if you had like a junior bridesmaid. Personally, I think for like an adult woman, it's a little bit small. I would do another layer on the outside. But again, it comes down to your personal preference and your budget. If you're happy with this size for your bridesmaids, that's totally fine. I'm gonna point out something that I do because it's bugging me right now, and it's a good kind of little tip. When I'm working, I don't like very long stems because they get in the way and they hit the table. And your finished bouquet is going to be cut short anyways. You can just cut these stems. Oops, that one just went flying. You can cut the stems shorter before you even start working or as you work. It's just a little easier to handle. So we are about a third of the way there. It's a very quick bouquet. Oh, it's another chance for me to show you another tip. Again, totally personal preference, but I like to bind my bouquet several times while I work. Some people will do it once at the very end. I find if you wait till the very end, sometimes the flowers will move around, and I don't know, it's personal preference, but I like to, when it starts looking the way I want, I'll bind it really quick. And I bind it kind of close to the top but not too high, very snug, or else the flowers will move around. That's a good place to tape it, so you can see that there. And again, I'm using this strapping tape, which is a lot more secure than the floral tape. Okay, so we are ready to keep going. So as we add roses, so we have the first layer and you can see it's already starting to make a dome shape. As you add more, I like to add them just a little bit lower, just a bit. And that kind of starts making even more of a rounded dome shape. So we keep moving them in. If you're able to work by a mirror, I highly recommend it. I still like to look in the mirror just to see that what I'm making is symmetrical. You'll miss a lot when you look down on a bouquet, but if you're able to look at yourself holding a bouquet, you'll see gaps and you'll see places where it's asymmetrical. And if you don't have a mirror, if you have someone who could hold the bouquet for you and while you take a step back and look at it, that helps quite a bit as well. So we have now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. That's roughly what I would consider a good bridesmaid bouquet size. So it's a little bit bigger than what we had before, what I would call a junior bridesmaid size. I think this is much more proportionate to someone who's grown. But again, it's a personal preference. Some brides that are very, very petite, they actually prefer like a bridesmaid size bouquet. So if you're on the petite size, again, you can be open to something like that. It all comes down to personal preference. I know I say that a lot, but it really does with floral arranging. Once you kind of get the basics down, it really is a matter of making it work for your preference and also your budget. So again, I'm adding the roses at the very end, and because now they're kind of being added sort of really on an angle, this is when I start angling them in, because otherwise they have a tendency to snap if you try to insert them completely straight. And I'm going a little lower, so you're kind of like in steps, like here's a gap, and I'm not gonna put it up here, I'm gonna insert it just a little lower, and we're getting that really beautiful, classic, round, domed shape. Almost there. I kind of feel like I would have liked to tie it off, but we're almost done, so we'll just keep going. The trend right now is for mixed bouquets, and trends come and go. The rose bouquet, though, is still a classic. Every year we get requests for it, multiple requests in a year. I love roses. They're an excellent choice for DIY weddings. They handle well. They're easy to work with. They're relatively long lasting as well. These roses, I'm filming this video on a Saturday, and I picked them up on a Monday, so it's been about 6 days. I didn't put them in my cooler. I had them sitting for about half that time in my apartment. The other half of the time they were sitting outside because it's a bit cooler at nighttime. So they've lasted really well. The other thing about roses is they come in a wide variety of colors, and particularly some colors that are really hard to get in the floral industry, like coral. If you've got coral as one of your wedding colors, I'd highly recommend being open to roses. I had another point to make. I don't remember now. It'll come back to me. So we're getting there. Oh yes, okay. So the point I had was, so the trend now is for mixed bouquets. So if you're not keen on a rose bouquet as a bridal bouquet, that's okay, that's totally fine. But if you're looking to keep your costs down, or to make it easier on yourself, like I said, this is one of the easier bouquets you can make. You can do a mixed bouquet for the bride, but I would consider doing a rose bouquet for the bridesmaids, because you still get the mixed bouquet you love as a bride, but you're really simplifying things and keeping your costs down by doing coordinating just rose bridal bouquets or bridesmaid bouquets for your girls. Okay, so you know what? I like it. I think we're gonna stop here. We have used 23 roses. So like I said, it's not an exact science, but I like the way it looks to me. Just from a quick glance, it looks symmetrical, it looks round, I'm happy with it, and now we're ready to tie it off. So I'm just gonna quickly trim these stems. Normally, I have a bucket that I drop my garbage into and my trimmings. It's really important to keep your workspace neat, but just to keep things going, I'm just gonna leave the stuff here. Okay, so we're gonna bind this, again with a strapping tape. This is another reason I like strapping tape. With the floral tape, you have to kind of stretch it to make it stick, and it never really sticks that well, but I find this stuff's a lot easier to use. It's kind of like a really thin duct tape almost, or masking tape, so it's just a lot more secure. So to do the ribbon, there's no real trick to it. You're gonna secure it with the pins. So you have your pins ready. You unwind just a bit. You don't use a lot of ribbon, so you don't, I'd say maybe half a yard per bouquet would be plenty. So this is gonna be a bit tricky to see in the video, but you start at the very top and you just sort of hold it. Like I don't even bind it at the beginning, I only bind it at the very bottom. And you're just gonna start, the tension will hold the bouquet ribbon in place. So you start winding it around, and you for sure wanna cover any tape you used. How far down you go, it really depends on your preference. I don't tend to go too far down. I find that if the ribbon goes too far, when you put it in the vase of water, and during transport especially, the water splashes up, gets on the ribbon, and the ribbon acts like a wick, so the whole thing gets soaked, and you're standing there holding a wet bouquet, and doesn't feel very pleasant. So I'd stop about there. I think that's a good place to stop. So when you get to the point that you're done, you just trim it. And because this is a raw trimmed edge, it doesn't look very nice, and wedding work is all about looking elegant. So you fold it back just to hide that raw edge, just like that. And this is where the short pins come in handy. You can just insert them completely horizontal in this case, because the bouquet handle is thick enough that they will not go through to the other side. The long pins, you'd have to insert them on an angle, either up or down, because they tend to be really long. And they're really hard to insert when they're that long. They sometimes start to bend if the stems are too thick and too strong. So I don't think we'll do the trim today, but if you wanted to, I love the silver trim. It also comes in gold. It's an easy way to jazz up a bouquet. I mean, look how beautiful that looks. You can put it at the top, you can put it at the bottom, you can put little sparkly pins in the roses. It's super elegant. But I like this. I think we're ready to stop. This is good. The last thing we have to do is get it in water. So the important thing to note with all flowers is that they, within seconds of being cut, will start to seal up their end. So it's very, very important. Hydration is the most important thing when you're trying to keep your flowers as long as possible, is to make a clean, strong cut and get them in water as soon as possible. This is why I like to have the snips. So you make a clean cut at the bottom, you try to get them all even. And that's why you want your vase of water ready. So just going everywhere. You don't want to waste any time. Right away into the water. You really only need a couple of inches of water at the bottom, if that. You could even do less. The most important thing is to keep just the last inch or so of the stems sitting in water, just so they keep drinking. Otherwise, during transport, if it's shaking around, the water, if it's too high, can splash on the ribbon, and it just gets soaked all the way up to the top. Okay, and there you have it. That's our rose hand-tied bridal bouquet. If you live in the Vancouver area and you have any questions about DIY wedding flowers or bulk flowers, drop us a line, visit our website. And if you have any requests for future videos, definitely let us know. I'd love to hear. Otherwise, we'll see you next time.